The Toda and the Tahr. What was that? Camus asked sharply. His dog Cooch growled. They both listened intently. The boy and his dog were on a ledge on a mountainside, which jutted into space. At their feet lay a chasm, deep and frightening. As they stood listening, the call was repeated. It was a cry of distress, and it was becoming fainter. But it was enough to tell Camus that the sound came from a narrow strip of jungle between two cliffs. Camus, closely followed by Cooch, rushed down a steep, rocky path towards the sound. He had to be careful. One false step would send him hurtling down the precipice that bordered the track. The small wood they entered was damp and dark. Camus had to slow down and grope about in the gloom. When his eyes had adjusted to the dim light, he saw a young Nilgiri Tahr caught in a snare. The animal gave a last feeble bleat, stopped struggling, and lay still. Camus thought it was dead. The wire of the snare had cut deeply into its neck, and the animal was bleeding. Camus passed his hand lightly over the animal. There was no other visible injury, though. He could feel its heart pounding rapidly. He sat beside the animal and loosened the snare gently. The kid gulped in air in great gasps. Camus carried it to a small spring. There, he bathed the young Tahr's wound and dressed it with leaves of plants which he had seen his people use to heal wounds. Look after our young friend, Camus ordered his dog. Then he searched the strip of forest for more snares. Sure enough, there were 3 more. They were cunningly set on hunting trails used by Tahr crossing from one section of the cliff to the other. The snare would pass over the neck or body of an animal that walked through it and hold it. As the trapped animal struggled to free itself, the noose would tighten, leading to its death. If the snare caught it round the body or a leg, it would starve to death. It was a cruel way to capture animals. Camus was furious. Camus knew who the culprits were. They were tribals who lived in the jungle below and were hunters and trappers. Camus wondered how they had found their way there. He did not know of any track leading over the cliffs into the jungle below. Then he remembered seeing a party of hunters on the cliff line some days ago. He wished he had followed them to find out what they were doing. He tore the snares from the trees to which they were anchored and threw them down a cliff where no one could reach them. The cry of the young Tahr in distress had attracted others besides Camus. 2 of the hunter tribe who happened to be hunting in the jungle below heard it. They hurried to claim their prize. The strip of forest where Camus found the trapped Tahr fell away abruptly. Camus stood there wondering how the hunters planned to visit their traps. Cautiously, he moved forward to investigate. At his feet lay a well-plaited rope made of cane. It reached right down to the jungle below, which at this point was not far away. As Camus watched, the rope suddenly came to life and wriggled like a snake. He leaned forward to have a better look and in so doing almost tumbled over. 2 hunters were climbing up the side of the precipice with the help of the rope, and one of them had almost reached the top. The man's fingers groped for a handhold to pull himself up. He glared into the boy's eyes, trying to frighten him into inaction. Camus's blood froze. Suddenly he remembered the wood-cutting knife he had in his hand. He made as if to cut the rope. Now it was the hunter's turn to be frightened. Shouting a warning to his companion, he slid down the rope as rapidly as possible. Kamos waited until the men were about a dozen feet from the ground, and then cut the rope. As they fell, he warned them, "This should teach you a lesson." To make sure that the poachers would not use their shortcut to the plateau for some time, Kamos cut down the trees and plants that were likely to serve as a support for a rope ladder. While he was busy, the young Tahr regained consciousness. When it opened its eyes, what should it see but a large, fierce-looking dog staring at it? The young animal took fright. It decided that the best thing to do was to lie still and behave as though it were dead, a tactic used by some wild animals. It lay still until Kamos returned. Kamos was not sure how the young Tahr would be received. He was in the habit of taking abandoned creatures home. Todas are fond of wild animals and do not harm them, preferring to see them in the wild. Every time Kamos took some animal to Mofmund, his home, the last one a sambar fawn whose mother had been killed by a leopard, he was asked to take it back and release it. Even with Cooch, there was much opposition. When Kamos reached home with the Tahr, his mother objected, saying that another pet would be a nuisance. Kamos pointed to the wound on the young animal's neck and asked, "Do you want me to feed him to the jackals?" "If you want to keep him, get an elder's permission," his mother ordered. Kamos at once thought of Kodan, who lived at the far end. He was a kind and understanding old man. Kamos approached him and saluted him in the manner that was customary among Todas. Salutation over, Kamos told Kodan about the Tahr kid's rescue. Although the Todas and Tahr had shared the Nilgiri plateau for centuries, they had never made close contact. The boy seemed so eager that Kodan did not have the heart to disappoint him. "You did right in rescuing the animal," he said. "Look after it well, and let it join its herd when its wound has healed." Kamos's work was herding buffalo calves. It was a full-time occupation. The Todas are a pastoral people. Their life is centered around their buffalo herds. Kamos worried that he might not be able to look after the Tahr kid properly. Fortunately, Simil, his cousin, offered to look after it in his absence. She was equally fond of animals. Greatly relieved, Kamos was able to devote time to his usual work. Treated under the guidance of Kamos's father, the young Tahr's wound healed fast. During this period, Kamos kept the Tahr kid in the closed pen along with buffalo calves. Soon the Tahr kid made friends with its companions. The sounds and smells and the presence of people did not frighten it anymore. It soon became very tame with Kamos and Simil and played with them. Before long, Kamos was able to let it out whenever he was around, and the kid made no attempt to run away. Instead, it began following Kamos wherever he went.